Lady, the welfare
We've
office
reviewed
is
your
3 blocks
application,
down.
and everything
This isn't
seems
a
to be in
charity
order.
desk. I've seen your kind too many
That's
times.
wonderful news.
Fake IDs, fake stories, trying to take money that isn't yours. The words crashed through the marble lobby like a slap, every syllable dripping with disdain, loud enough for customers to stop and stare. Diana Harper stood perfectly still, her breath steady but heart pounding. At 42, she had argued in federal courts and built a billion-dollar investment group from scratch. She had sat across tables from men who thought she didn't belong, and out-negotiated every one of them. But this public humiliation still stung, because it wasn't just private disrespect. It was a spectacle. The teller, Robert Chen, sat with his chin high, smirk widening. 12 years at the bank, a record of buried complaints, and now he performed for the crowd. He leaned back, enjoying the silence he had created, feeding on the discomfort of strangers. Diana placed her leather portfolio on the counter and laid out a withdrawal slip in neat block letters. Her voice, measured and calm, carried across the lobby. "I would like to withdraw $50,000 from my account." For a split second, the room held its breath. Robert laughed harshly. $50,000? That's rich. You couldn't possibly have that. What is this, some game? He crumpled the slip between his fingers, treating it like garbage. Let me guess. You're a CEO, an investor? I've heard that line too many times. Save it. The words dripped with sarcasm, with the unspoken message that someone like her did not belong among what he considered real clients. Diana looked at him unflinching. Her eyes didn't narrow. Her mouth didn't move. But inside she catalogued every detail, every gesture, every word, because she knew patience was her sharpest weapon. She reached into her purse and produced a platinum banking card bearing her name embossed in silver letters, alongside her state driver's license. "My account number is there. You can verify immediately." Robert picked them up with 2 fingers, holding them high like tainted evidence. "Fake IDs are everywhere. These platinum cards are a dime a dozen on the street. You really think you can pass this off on me? Not a chance." Around them, tension thickened. A woman in line leaned to her companion and whispered, "They should call security." An elderly man sitting in the waiting chairs clenched his jaw, shaking his head slowly, but said nothing, perhaps weighed down by too many memories of scenes like this. In the back, Maya Chen, a young journalist with sharp instincts, pulled out her phone and tapped the Go Live button. Her caption was simple: "Banking discrimination happening right now." Within moments, dozens were watching, then hundreds, then 1,000. Strangers on the internet tuned in to see what was happening in a New York bank lobby at lunchtime. Diana could feel eyes on her from every corner, but she refused to be broken. "I have been a customer of this bank for over 10 years. You have everything you need to confirm my account. Please process my withdrawal." But Robert wasn't listening. He was performing. He spread his arms wide, gesturing at the crystal chandeliers above. "This is Metropolitan Trust Bank, a place for serious clients with serious money, not a check-cashing corner store." His words, meant to degrade, reverberated through the lobby. Some customers nodded approvingly, convinced he was protecting the bank. Others frowned, recognizing bias for what it was. Maya's phone captured every expression, every pause, every cruel laugh. The live stream comments began to flood in. "This is disgusting. Where is this bank? Name and shame." Within minutes, the story was escaping the marble walls and racing across the digital world. Diana stood motionless, a storm of humiliation around her, but her calm presence created its own gravity. She had not raised her voice, not snapped back, not given them the satisfaction of seeing her shaken. She understood something the teller did not. Every second was being documented, every insult preserved, and very soon those words would turn back on the people who had uttered them. The sound of sharp heels struck the marble floor, cutting through the murmurs like a drumbeat. From her glass office near the back stepped Susan Porter, the branch manager, a woman known among staff for strict rules and a sharper tongue. She walked with the authority of someone convinced her job was to protect the bank at all costs, not serve the customers. She paused by the counter, arms folded across her chest. "What seems to be the issue here?" Robert was quick to answer, eager to prove his loyalty. "This woman is trying to withdraw an unusually large sum, $50,000, and her documents are suspicious. I've seen multiple red flags." He said it with the confidence of someone who knew his superior would back him up. Susan did not disappoint. Her eyebrows rose high, lips pursed, and she gave Diana a look that was both dismissive and rehearsed. "That does sound unusual. Ma'am, do you have proper identification and employment verification? We require strict procedures for transactions of this size." Her voice was cold, deliberate, loud enough for every customer within earshot to hear. Diana kept her composure, sliding her driver's license and bank card across the counter once again, her hands steady. "Everything you need is right here." But Susan didn't even glance at them. Instead, she exchanged a knowing look with Robert, a look that spoke volumes, that said, "We will not be fooled today." "Ma'am, anyone can print fake cards these days. We have to protect the bank from fraud. I'll need employment verification, tax returns, and a written explanation of what you plan to do with the money." The words fell like bricks, heavy and humiliating, designed to stall and intimidate. A few customers shifted uncomfortably. One young man near the loan officer's desk muttered, "This is ridiculous. She gave you ID." But Susan silenced him with a sharp glance. "Sir, please don't interfere with bank security procedures." The atmosphere grew tense, the line of customers splitting into two camps, some nodding in agreement with the staff, others shaking their heads at the injustice unfolding before them. Maya's live stream kept running, her phone steady, the viewer count climbing past 3,000, comments streaming faster than her eyes could read. "This is discrimination. Call the news. Where is this bank?" Screenshots of Robert's smirk and Susan's dismissive stare were already being shared on social media. Diana stood firm, her voice calm though the weight of humiliation pressed down. "I have been a client here for more than a decade. My account is in good standing. You can confirm it in your system in less than a minute." Susan shook her head slowly, her voice rising. "We have protocols, ma'am, especially with certain accounts. These measures are for everyone's safety." The phrase hung in the air like poison, and the crowd seemed to understand exactly what she meant. Certain accounts, certain types of customers. Maya zoomed in, catching the glance Susan shared with Robert, capturing the way they leaned together as if united in their suspicion. From the back office, a new figure appeared, tall and broad-shouldered. Vincent Cole, the security guard, his expression unreadable as he approached the counter. He had worked this branch for a decade, had seen tempers flare and customers get loud. But he had never liked these moments when management called him out not for safety, but for intimidation. "We may need your assistance, Vincent," Susan said, her voice deliberately loud. "This could be a fraud case." The words rippled across the lobby, more phones lifted, more cameras captured the scene. Diana's phone buzzed in her purse, a reminder of the conference call she was supposed to join later that afternoon with the Federal Reserve. But she silenced it without looking, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her distracted. Robert leaned back in his chair again, sighing theatrically. "Look, lady, I see this every week. People with sob stories, fake documents, trying to smooth talk their way into quick cash. But it doesn't work here. This is Metropolitan Trust, not a corner store." A middle-aged woman behind Diana nodded in agreement, whispering to her friend, "Good thing they're careful these days. All sorts of scams out there." But others were not convinced. The elderly man shook his head, muttering, "Same story every time." His words carried the weight of decades of quiet battles, but still he did not step forward. Diana placed both hands on the counter, her posture steady. She did not raise her voice, did not argue. Instead, she let the silence speak, her dignity filling the room even as Robert and Susan tried to strip it away. Maya's live stream had crossed 5,000 viewers now, comments pouring in. "This is disgusting. Sue them. We're watching live." Somewhere across the city, journalists began taking notice, embedding the feed into their websites. A storm was building. Susan checked her watch, irritation flashing in her eyes. She had a management meeting in less than an hour. Yet here she stood, unwilling to let go of the performance she and Robert had begun. She gestured toward the waiting area by the security desk. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we complete verification. This could take some time." The words were delivered with false courtesy, but the meaning was clear. Sit down like a suspect while the real customers do their business. Vincent shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Diana, then back at his manager, his conscience pulling against his orders. Diana did not move. She looked at Susan, then at Robert, then at Vincent. Her silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. Maya's phone screen showed more than 7,000 people watching. The hashtag #BankingWhileBlack beginning to trend. Customers in the lobby whispered to one another, sensing they were witnessing something larger than a routine bank visit. The lobby was already heavy with tension when the sound of the executive elevator doors sliding open turned every head. Out strode Marcus Bennett, the regional director for Metropolitan Trust, a man in his 50s with silver hair combed flat against his scalp and a reputation for handling crises by burying them deeper rather than solving them. His expensive suit seemed to announce his authority before he spoke, and as he walked briskly across the marble floor, the staff straightened as if salvation had arrived. Robert was the first to speak, almost giddy with relief. "Mr. Bennett, we've got a situation here. Potential fraud, large withdrawal, suspicious documentation, multiple red flags." Susan chimed in with practiced certainty. "She's insisting on $50,000 without providing adequate verification. We're following protocol, but she's refusing to cooperate." Marcus's eyes fell on Diana, then on the growing circle of customers watching, then on the row of phones lifted high, recording every angle. His jaw tightened, not out of empathy, but out of recognition that whatever was happening was spiraling beyond his control. Yet he did what he always did. He chose to project authority, his voice booming across the lobby. "Ma'am, I am Marcus Bennett, regional director for this bank, and I take potential fraud very seriously. These elaborate schemes are becoming more common, and it is my responsibility to protect this institution." His words carried a presumption that guilt had already been decided, that Diana was not a valued client but a suspect in a crime that existed only in their minds. Diana stood motionless, her portfolio resting on the counter, her ID and platinum card still untouched where Robert had set them aside. When she spoke, her voice was calm but steady. "There is no confusion." "Mr. Bennett, I am requesting to withdraw money from my own account. You have everything you need to verify it." Marcus's lips tightened, his tone sharpened. "Ma'am, identity theft and document forgery are sophisticated these days. We cannot take risks. Transparency is important. The public should see how we protect against fraud." He deliberately rejected Vincent's quiet suggestion to move to a private office, insisting instead on making Diana an example in front of everyone. Maya's live stream surged past 12,000 viewers, comments exploding with outrage, civil rights lawyers typing in real time, journalists embedding the feed into breaking news pages, strangers demanding accountability. And still, Diana did not flinch, her hands resting gently on the counter as if steadying the entire room with her composure. Robert and Susan hovered beside Marcus like lieutenants, their faces smug with the certainty that they were untouchable, that authority was on their side. Yet unease flickered in Marcus's eyes as he noticed the cameras multiplying, customers whispering about discrimination, the young professional in the corner demanding to see the policy that required this treatment. Marcus raised his hand to silence the murmurs. "Ma'am, until we receive additional documentation, tax returns, employment verification, and a full affidavit explaining the source of these funds, we cannot proceed with this withdrawal. You may wait in the designated area while we complete our process." His words were deliberate, humiliating, a public order to sit like a criminal waiting for judgment. And still Diana did not move, her eyes fixed on him, her silence more powerful than defiance, because she understood that every insult was now evidence, every delay another layer of exposure, every gesture another piece of proof for the world already watching. Maya's phone buzzed with notifications. Her street, climbing toward 15,000 live viewers, hashtags spreading across platforms, #banking while black flashing on screens, screenshots being shared with captions demanding justice. Marcus felt the weight of attention growing heavier by the second. But instead of backing down, he leaned into his role, trying to control the narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing how seriously Metropolitan Trust takes fraud prevention. This institution will not be compromised by criminals posing as customers." His declaration was meant to reassure the crowd, but instead it fueled the storm online. Lawyers tweeting that no law authorized such treatment, activists calling for immediate accountability, customers in the lobby exchanging uneasy glances as the line between caution and cruelty became impossible to ignore. Diana's phone vibrated again. Messages from her assistant, from board members, from her lawyer who had already seen the live stream and was offering to intervene. But she ignored them, her patience deliberate, her calm presence a contrast to the noise around her. Vincent shifted again, torn between his duty as security and his conscience as a man who recognized injustice when it stared him in the face. His silence heavy, his discomfort visible to anyone paying attention. Marcus glanced at him and snapped, "Officer Cole, stay alert. This may escalate." But Vincent only nodded stiffly, his eyes betraying the conflict within. The crowd inside the bank grew restless, some frustrated at the delay, others outraged by the discrimination. Outside on the street, more people were gathering, alerted by the live stream, curious bystanders pressing against the glass to see the spectacle. The overhead speaker crackled, "Executive board meeting, 15 minutes?" Those words seemed to echo louder in Diana's mind than the insults circling around her, because she knew the moment to act had arrived. With deliberate calm, she reached down, opened her leather portfolio, and slowly withdrew a single business card, her movements measured, her face unshaken. The crowd leaned forward instinctively, sensing a change in the air. Maya's live stream capturing every flick of her wrist, every detail of the embossed lettering glinting under the lobby's lights. Diana placed the card gently on the counter in front of Robert, who glanced down dismissive at first, then squinted as he read aloud with his mocking tone. "Diana Harper, Chief Executive Officer, Harper Capital Group." His laugh cut through the silence. "Oh, come on. They sell fake business cards by the dozen these days. You really think this proves anything?" He flicked it back toward her as if tossing away trash. But then Marcus stepped closer, curiosity prickling at the back of his mind. The name was familiar. The weight of the cardstock unusual. The precise font stirring a memory from recent corporate briefings he had half ignored. His eyes narrowed as he picked it up again, reading more carefully this time. "Harper Capital Group," he murmured. The name tasting different now because it was tied to one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast, a firm with billions under management. Diana did not flinch, did not rush. She simply reached into her portfolio again and produced a second card. This one heavier. This one bearing the Metropolitan Trust Bank logo itself, alongside fine print that made Marcus's face drain of color. Legal text declaring her status as a board member, a preferred shareholder, Series A with full voting rights. Maya zoomed her camera in. The live stream viewers watching as Marcus's hands trembled slightly while he read and reread the words as if hoping they might change before his eyes. His voice cracked when he whispered, You're on the board. And Diana's reply was calm but devastating. I don't just sit on the board, Mr. Bennett. Harper Capital Group owns 29% of Metropolitan Trust, making you as the largest single shareholder of this institution. The words dropped like a hammer. The lobby gasped collectively, the murmurs of disbelief swelling into a chorus. Robert's mouth fell open, the smirk wiped clean, the business card slipping from his fingers to the counter. Susan took an instinctive step back as if the documents burned. And Vincent, the security guard who had stood torn for so long, closed his eyes briefly and nodded to himself. Recognition dawning that he had known this woman's face from corporate newsletters, from annual shareholder reports, from the very posters hanging in the employee break room. Maya's live stream exploded, her viewer count leaping from 15,000 to over 30,000 in less than a minute, comments pouring in at lightning speed. She owns the bank. Plot twist of the century. They harassed their own boss. Screenshots of Robert's smug grin, now paired with captions branding him the face of systemic bias. Diana remained steady, her voice calm but sharper now, the tone of a woman who had carried power quietly and was done pretending. For the past 8 months, I have been conducting anonymous visits to our branches, documenting how customers are treated when they do not announce who they are. Today's interaction was designed to test frontline service protocols, and you, Mr. Chen, and you, Ms. Porter, have provided more data than I could have imagined. Marcus's face tightened, panic flooding his features as he realized the full scope of what had just unfolded. And still, Diana continued, each word a scalpel cutting deeper. What you thought was a simple humiliation of a customer has instead become a case study in discrimination at the highest levels of this bank. And it has been documented in real time for regulators, for investors, and for the public. The crowd in the lobby shifted. Those who had earlier whispered in support of the staff now shrinking back, embarrassed, horrified that they had sided with prejudice. While others who had defended Diana quietly straightened, vindicated, their voices rising in applause that began in scattered claps but grew stronger as customers realized the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Robert stammered, Ms. Harper, I was just following procedure. His earlier arrogance reduced to desperation, his eyes darting to the cameras now fixed on his pale face. But Diana turned her gaze on him, steady and unblinking. Show me the written policy that instructs you to treat black customers as criminals until proven otherwise. Point to the manual that authorizes racial profiling. Robert opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His 12 years of practice at intimidation worthless now. His silence more damning than any confession. Susan tried to recover, her voice trembling. Perhaps we can resolve this internally through proper channels. But Diana cut her off, her authority unmistakable. This matter became external the moment you attempted to humiliate a shareholder in public, and the live stream has already ensured that regulators, journalists, and investors are watching. She tapped her phone, showing notifications from Washington. Congressional staffers already alerted, regulators already informed. Marcus wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, realizing too late that the story had already escaped, that damage control was no longer possible, that the very foundation of his career was crumbling in real time. Maya's viewer count climbed to 40,000, major news outlets embedding the feed live, hashtags trending worldwide, the moment immortalized as the most expensive customer service failure in banking history. Diana opened her portfolio again, spreading out confidential documents across the counter. Quarterly reports, discrimination complaint logs, legal briefs prepared by her attorneys. The data, undeniable. Star 2, formal complaints in 8 months. 81% involving customers of color. Patterns of neglect at branches under Ms. Porter's supervision. Fail. Years of oversight under Mr. Bennett's regional leadership. Each page another nail in the coffin of their credibility. The crowd murmured louder, the applause growing bolder until the sound of clapping filled the lobby like thunder, drowning out the protests of staff who realized too late that their power had vanished, that the balance had shifted forever. Diana lifted her chin slightly, her calm voice carrying over the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the test of Metropolitan Trust's customer service protocols, and the results will be presented to the board upstairs in a matter of minutes. The finality of her words froze the staff in place. Robert, pale and sweating. Susan clutching her badge as if it might save her. Marcus staring at the documents like a man who had just seen his career dissolve. And Vincent standing straighter now, as though a weight had been lifted from his conscience, his respect for Diana visible in his steady gaze. Maya whispered into her phone. She owns the bank. Her voice shaking with excitement, the comments on her stream scrolling too fast to read. The world outside now fully aware that a simple withdrawal had turned into a reckoning. And Diana, calm as ever, gathered her papers, slid them back into her portfolio, and with one last steady look at the staff who had tried to diminish her, turned toward the elevator. The applause followed her like a rising tide, the sound of justice beginning to take shape in the very heart of the institution that had tried to deny her dignity. The boardroom on the top floor was designed to intimidate. A long mahogany table gleaming under recessed lights, leather chairs lined like sentinels, walls hung with oil portraits of former presidents of the bank. But as Diana Harper stepped inside, portfolio in hand, escorted not by deference, but by the thunder of applause still echoing from the lobby bell, the power dynamic shifted in an instant. Every executive in the room rose to their feet, more from shock than respect, because they knew by now what the world knew, that the woman they had just watched humiliated on a live stream was not an ordinary customer, but the largest shareholder of Metropolitan Trust, a woman who held in her hands the fate of the institution itself. David Chen, the bank's president, stood at the head of the table, his usual composure strained, his eyes darting from the television screen on the wall broadcasting Maya's live feed to the stack of documents Diana placed firmly before him. Ms. Harper, he began, his voice low. This is an unprecedented situation. But she raised her hand slightly, stopping him mid-sentence, her tone calm but razor-sharp. Unprecedented situations require unprecedented accountability, and accountability begins here, now. She turned first toward Robert Chen, who had been escorted upstairs by Susan in a desperate attempt to contain the fallout, his face pale, his body trembling as he clutched the edge of the table. Her words cut through him with the precision of a scalpel. Mr. Chen, your 12 years of employment at this institution end today, effective immediately. Your record of discriminatory complaints was ignored, but your behavior today has been broadcast to millions. You are hereby terminated for violation of federal anti-discrimination laws and for causing reputational and financial harm to Metropolitan Trust. Robert tried to stammer a defense. I was just following... But Diana's gaze silenced him. David nodded grimly, already signing the dismissal papers that had been drafted within minutes of the scandal breaking. Then she turned her eyes on Susan Porter, whose arms were crossed tightly, her jaw clenched as if defiance could shield her. Diana's voice was steady but devastating. Ms. Porter, as branch manager, you had a duty to intervene. Instead, you reinforced bias, escalated humiliation, and enabled misconduct. Your supervisory negligence has now placed this institution under regulatory scrutiny. You are suspended indefinitely pending full investigation. But for all practical purposes, your leadership here is finished." Susan's shoulders sagged. Her lips parted as if to argue, but the weight of the evidence left her mute. Her eyes fell to the floor as the reality of her downfall settled in. Then Diana looked directly at Marcus Bennett, the regional director, whose face was gray with dread, sweat forming at his temples. Her tone hardened further. "Mr. Bennett, your pattern of dismissing discrimination complaints across multiple branches has been documented. Today's display of arrogance only confirms your unfitness to lead. Your position requires immediate review by the board, and I will recommend your resignation to prevent further damage." Marcus swallowed hard, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Ms. Harper, please. I was only trying to protect—" But Diana cut him off, her words precise. "You protected bias. You protected arrogance. And you protected a culture that devalues customers based on race. And now you will answer for it." The silence in the room was suffocating, executives shifting in their seats, some pale, some sweating. All of them realizing that the performance downstairs had become a trial in this room, and the verdicts were falling one after another. Then Diana turned, her voice softening slightly as she addressed Vincent Cole, who had been summoned reluctantly but now stood straighter than he had in years. His security uniform crisp, his expression both anxious and hopeful. Her words carried not condemnation, but recognition. "Officer Cole, I saw your hesitation, your discomfort. You were placed in an impossible position, but your integrity shone through, and it will not go unnoticed. Effective immediately, you are being promoted to Director of Compliance and Custo, MER Advocacy, reporting directly to the board. Your role will be to ensure that what happened today never happens again." Vincent blinked hard, emotion flooding his eyes as the weight of her words sank in. The promotion catapulting him from a guard at the door to a voice in the boardroom. Scattered applause broke out around the table, executives nodding as though to prove they supported this new direction, though many were still shaken to their core. Then Diana turned back to David Chen, her portfolio opened, her documents spread across the gleaming wood. Her voice carried the certainty of someone who had already won. "The market has spoken. Our stock is down over $400 million in value in a single hour. Regulators are already circling. Investors are demanding answers, but we can still salvage trust if and only if we take immediate and decisive action." She laid out her terms with the precision of a courtroom argument, each point a nail hammered into the old culture. Mandatory bias training for every frontline employee. Real-time AI monitoring of customer interactions to detect discrimination. Creation of an independent civil rights ombudsman with power to terminate employees and revise policies. And a $25 million community investment fund to support minority-owned businesses and financial literacy programs. She paused only briefly, her eyes sweeping the room, her voice steady. "This is not negotiable. This is the cost of survival. Fail to implement these reforms and Harper Capital Group will divest our 29% stake immediately, triggering investor flight that will collapse this bank before the next quarter." The board sat in stunned silence. Then, one by one, heads began to nod, hands raised in agreement, not because they wanted reform, but because they understood extinction was the alternative. David, his hands trembling slightly, declared, "The board accepts Ms. Harper's conditions unanimously. Implementation begins immediately." Outside the boardroom, Maya's live stream captured the breaking news, her viewers now cresting past 80,000 as she narrated breathlessly. She just fired the staff who humiliated her. She just forced the board to approve sweeping reforms. This is history. Diana gathered her documents with deliberate calm, her portfolio snapping shut like a gavel striking wood. As she turned toward the glass wall overlooking the city, the applause from below still faintly audible, she spoke the words that would define the moment. "Accountability is not a request. It is a requirement. And it begins today." The weight of her presence hung in the room long after she walked out. The executives left behind knowing the culture of silence and arrogance had just been shattered, replaced by a mandate for justice that would echo far beyond the walls of Metropolitan Trust. 6 months later, the echoes of that Friday afternoon had not faded. They had deepened into a transformation that no one in the banking world could ignore. Because what began as humiliation at a teller's counter had grown into a blueprint for accountability, and the name Diana Harper was now spoken in boardrooms, in congressional hearings, and in classrooms teaching future leaders about dignity and power. Metropolitan Trust Bank had implemented every reform she demanded, not reluctantly, but urgently, knowing survival depended on it. And the results spoke louder than any press release. Discrimination complaints across all branches had dropped 49% in half a year. Minority business lending had increased 36%. Customer satisfaction scores had risen to levels never before recorded in the bank's history. And the stock price, which had collapsed nearly $500 million in hours, not only recovered but surpassed its previous high, rising almost 9% above pre-scandal levels as investors rewarded the institution for its visible commitment to change. The AI system Diana required had been launched nationwide, quietly monitoring thousands of daily interactions, flagging language patterns that suggested bias, alerting supervisors within seconds, and more than once preventing another disaster before it began. The independent ombudsman she appointed, a former Justice Department attorney named Patricia Stone, had already investigated and resolved dozens of cases. Her reputation for uncompromising fairness, restoring confidence among customers who had long felt ignored. The $25 million Community Investment Fund had gone into action, supporting small Black and Latino-owned businesses, funding financial literacy programs in schools and churches, creating opportunities that touched neighborhoods far from Manhattan's marble towers. And each month, new stories emerged. Families opening businesses, young people securing loans, communities gaining tools they had been denied for generations. Inside the bank itself, the culture was unrecognizable. Every employee required to complete 40 hours of bias training, annual recertification mandatory. Many described the sessions as uncomfortable but eye-opening. One teller admitted on camera that he had never realized how often he made assumptions about customers based only on appearance. Another said the training gave her the courage to call out a supervisor who tried to repeat old patterns. And at the center of it all stood Vincent Cole, no longer a guard in a blue uniform, but the director of compliance and customer advocacy, his voice carrying weight in the boardroom, his perspective shaping new policies, his very presence a symbol of how integrity, once recognized, could be elevated. Maya Chen, the journalist whose live stream had captured the nation's attention, had been hired as the bank's director of communications. Her documentary, The Day the Bank Changed, premiered at film festivals, praised for showing how ordinary people with smartphones could hold institutions accountable. And her rise proved that transparency, once unleashed, could never be put back into a box. Robert Chen, the teller who had mocked Diana, found work at a small credit union only after completing months of mandated training. And though humbled, he became a cautionary tale in workshops about unconscious bias, speaking reluctantly about the day arrogance ended his career. Susan Porter disappeared from the industry altogether, her name forever tied to the scandal. Marcus Bennett resigned under pressure, his departure sending a message that leadership built on denial could not withstand the sunlight of exposure. For Diana herself, the months that followed were not quiet. She testified before Congress about systemic bias in financial institutions, her words quoted across the nation. When discrimination becomes expensive, institutions change, not because they suddenly find morality, but because survival forces them to evolve. She spoke at Harvard Business School, telling students that dignity was not negotiable. And at the Global Banking Equality Summit, she reminded executives from around the world that reform was not charity, but necessity, declaring, "You cannot serve your shareholders if you do not first serve your customers with respect." Her schedule overflowed with invitations, but she never stopped reminding people that the victory was not hers alone. It belonged to every person who had ever been dismissed at a counter. Every customer told their money was suspicious. Every community forced to prove their worth twice over. And at home, she found quieter moments of meaning. One evening, her daughter Sophia handed her a school essay titled, "What Justice Looks Like," in which she wrote, "Justice is when my mom walks into a bank and changes the rules for everyone." And Diana, reading those words aloud at the kitchen table, felt the weight of her journey lift into something lighter, something hopeful. The applause that had begun in that lobby had never truly stopped. It had echoed into reforms, into opportunities, into a story retold in living rooms and classrooms across the country. A story of arrogance undone by patience, of cruelty defeated by calm, of dignity defended not with rage, but with truth. The lesson was clear for anyone willing to listen. Respect is not optional. Dignity is not negotiable, and justice, though often delayed, can arrive in the most unexpected of ways, sometimes with the simple act of a woman sliding a withdrawal slip across a counter and refusing to be diminished. As Diana closed her portfolio one final time in that boardroom 6 months earlier, she had declared that accountability begins today. And half a year later, the results were visible not only in the bank's numbers, but in the lives of people who finally walked into branches across the nation and felt seen, heard, and respected. What started as humiliation became transformation. What began with cruel words ended with an institution rebuilt on accountability. And the legacy of that day was not just a victory for one woman. It was a model for an entire industry. Proof that when bias is exposed and dignity is defended, justice has the power to reshape not only a bank, but a nation.